Hello and well met. This is Layman with the Fantasy Grounds Academy. I'd like to say happy Monday, and today we're going to talk about NPCs, making them a little bit more dynamic in Fantasy Grounds. I am using the D&D 5e rule set. However, this is just an example. You can kind of apply the same type of approach to any rule set that supports NPCs. And quite often in Fantasy Grounds and most rule sets, there is a notes or an other tab that you'll find in the NPC stat block area. So usually your main stat block area has all the mechanical stuff and anything that pertains to stats and the gameplay stuff. But on the back here is a really handy and nice little tab that you can pretty much put whatever you want. So I'm going to use the Bandit Captain as an example, and I want to show you some things that you can do in Fantasy Grounds to make these NPCs count a little bit more during your session. So quite often when you get a NPC stat block, that's typically what you'll get. You'll get the Bandit Captain title. You might get a description, and you might have a link here that points to a photo. So this one is just a real generic overview of a Bandit Captain that comes from the SRD. So this is giving you exactly what's given to you from the book. So quite often when these are converted, whoever does the conversion will just copy and paste whatever's provided in the actual book or the source. So this is sometimes could be a little bit vague or perhaps too open-ended for you, especially if you're new to Fantasy Grounds and role-playing games. So you might actually want to embellish your NPCs and make them a little bit more interesting and useful to you. And I think that we kind of miss out on some opportunities here, especially for like bosses and larger encounters, more important game-changing things that have to do with your narrative and your actual plots. So this on the right-hand side is your standard NPC stat block. And generally, sometimes you don't get anything back here. So this is on the Others tab or the Notes. So what I would like to propose is that you can actually add a lot of different things to help with your encounters and to make it a little bit simpler instead of scrambling through and trying to do all the stuff last minute. So I generally don't do this with minions unless they're really super cool, but I do this with like main NPCs, plot givers, anything that's going to help the story along and also contribute to running the game and making it easier for you. So essentially, this is a notes thing that I took earlier, and I went through and meticulously created a kind of more of a dynamic Bandit Captain. It's a little bit less generic, and it has a lot more options. So like I said, this one over here on the right is your basic one. And on the left, I've included all these different options. So this is a little excessive. You probably won't need every single thing I have on here. But these are all the examples that I can think of that might be useful for a game master when you're going to run an encounter. It's nice to have all these links and stuff prepared, even if you don't end up using them, because if you do use them, they're right there. You don't have to dig through the interface, and you're going to be able to access to access this content in conjunction with what's already there and with your gameplay. So this would help with speeding up things, so you're not fumbling around during your games, that sort of stuff. So I took some notes on here, and I took the liberty of just kind of going through and figuring out how I want to structure this. So this is basically your basic description that you're going to get out of the SRD. And if you ever want to edit an NPC, if you're new to Fantasy Grounds, you haven't done this before. So this Bandit Captain over here on the left is just a copy of the original. So you can take any NPC generally, and if you crack it open, you're able to edit it. But in this case, if you click on the Bandit Captain NPC, it's read-only, it's locked. You won't be able to edit it. So what you do is you just take any NPC that you want to make a copy of, you just left-click and drag and then drop it right back into the same list, and it will make a duplicate. And at that point, you can open it up and unlock it and edit. So that's how you would take an existing NPC and modify it if that's what you want to do. So the next step is, what kind of content do you want to put on this other tab. So I've made a lot of different little assets that will kind of enhance the NPC. And like I said, I don't normally do this for just basic minions. I usually do this for like bosses. You know, you could do it with whatever you want, but usually I'll do this with a boss or some sort of captain. In this case, this is the Bandit Captain. So this makes it so that you have access at your fingertips for the information that you might need to run your encounter. So for instance, right off the get-go, there's an image. So if I wanted to share this image with my group, it's right there and it's ready to go. And I actually generated this with AI, and then I added this fire back here to kind of give it motion, so it's not just a static image. And then there's a little bit of fog here that I put in to kind of make this image come to life. So it has a little bit more dimension, not so boring. So when you send this over to your players and you describe the Bandit Captain, that's what they're going to see instead of just a generic photo. So you can do stuff like that to bring out your encounters, to make them more memorable and to make them funner to run. So this is just an example of an image. You can use whatever images you want. You can use the one that are provided in the SRD. But if you got the time, go in and add your own art or your own images. So that's just an example. So then we take this information that comes from the SRD, and this is just what is provided normally up to this point. So it says it takes a strong personality, ruthless cunning, and a silver tongue to keep a gang of bandits in line. The Bandit Captain has these qualities in spades. In addition to managing a crew of selfish malcontents, the Pirate Captain is a variation of the Bandit Captain. With a ship to protect and command. To keep the crew in line, the captain must mete out rewards and punishments on a regular basis. More than treasure, a bandit captain or a pirate captain craves infamy. A prisoner who appeals to the captain's vanity or ego is more likely to be treated fairly than a prisoner who does not or claims to not know anything of the captain's reputation. So that's kind of the basis of this. And then I went in and added some dialogue options. So what this does is when you're in the middle of an encounter and you can't think of anything for the role-playing aspect, you can send these little dialogues to the chat. And what I've done is assigned it a speaker. In this case, it just says Bandit, because I don't necessarily want to give away that it's the captain. But through dialogue, they can make that, they can discern that. So it says, in this case, it says, "You've strayed into dangerous territory, my friends. What makes you think you can walk away unscathed?" The next one says, "I admire your bravery, but crossing paths with me is a gamble you won't win." So these are all little dialogue pieces. It can be whatever you want. For quest givers, you can give out clues or rumors, however you want to do it. But these little dialogue buttons here are things you can do in Fantasy Grounds, and you send this chat over to the chat window for your players, or you can just read them out loud, pick which one you want. I also made a table, so if you're uncertain what exactly they want to say, you can actually roll, and then it will give you the dialogue, and then you can actually hide this so the players don't see it. And I'm going to roll again, so this one won't be visible to the table. So you can read that out loud as kind of like your role-playing guide or some sort of thing. Usually, when I say some sort of thing, I mean like tied into your quest or into the dialogue that you're having at the time. These are just kind of like starting dialogues. They're not full-on role-playing notes. So then you get into Bandit Captain, the notes and tactics. So they do have some information about how they would operate, but I actually went to Keith Amon's website, The Monsters Know What They're Doing, and I looked up the Bandit Captain, and it kind of summarized what they had put there. And this helps you run the encounter, and it gives you an idea for some tactics. You don't have to necessarily follow these, but they are very helpful. So they usually have dexterity and strength as their priority attributes. Athletics, deception, those sort of things for negotiations and confrontations. The combat tactics, they have multi-attacks. So they get 3 attacks. They get 2, basically they get 2, 2 scimitars and a dagger. So they get 3 attacks. That's pretty amazing. I mean, that's cool. Um, Parry reaction. So they have a reaction where they can add +2 against one melee attack, choosing to parry the most dangerous opponent. So they have a special kind of tactic there where they can parry. So that's pretty cool. I can just imagine them using a dagger or a scimitar or 2 scimitars and kind of almost like fencing or something, like they're doing like a, like lots of cartwheels and flips and swirls and things like that. Negotiation and deception. So they'll engage in negotiation rather than immediate violence sometimes, and they often attempt to extract gold from the PCs or fabricate a convincing story based on their backgrounds to manipulate them. So they'll use things like that if they can. Hit point management. So they have 10 hit dice. They can endure a significant amount of damage, and they will use dodge and parry when they're overwhelmed. And it will also help let the bandit crossbowmen attack from a distance. So they might close the distance, but then just dodge and jump around while their minions pick off the players. So that's a pretty good tactic. They will assess PCs, make educated guesses about the motivations based on their appearance and background. They claim to be a righteous rebel sometimes against tyranny, almost like a Robin Hood type thing. Acolytes are nobles, so they will plead for poverty-driven banditry. So they'll kind of, make that excuse as to why they're doing it. Charlatans, criminals, and street urchins will tend to be their pretense, or to possibly try to recruit NPCs into their group. And then for adjusting in combat, if moderately wounded, like reduced to 45 hit points or fewer, the captain will negotiate during the fight. If seriously wounded, like reduced to 26 or fewer, the captain will surrender, usually. Not always. Avoiding throwing daggers, so they try to keep the daggers for melee combat, and they rely on bandits with crossbows for ranged attacks, so they have minions. Dexterity and wisdom saves, so they're proficient in saving throws. It makes them less afraid of magic, so that's helpful to know. And survival tactics would be that they value survival, so they try to negotiate to keep alive, so they don't, especially if they're wounded. So then I went in and made this whole big appearance thing. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially you can use this and paraphrase it to give this description out as the players meet the NPCs. So this helps with giving you that immersion. Maybe it will match the image that you've shared. It's kind of up to you how much you want to do, but this is a whole write-up, a mix down of all the different attributes of this guy or girl. It can be male or female. And that's the other thing, is if you have more than one image, you can link it to the NPC. It doesn't have to be one image. You can have a male or female variation. So, for instance, the Bandit Captain I have, this is the image. But if you wanted to use a female Bandit Captain, you could do the same thing. So you can have it so it's a little bit more flexible. You don't have to determine the sex right away. You can just say, a Bandit Captain, and then later on you can find out it's female or male. So you can do something like that to kind of make it more interesting and more dynamic, so that you have options for that. And then also there are other things such as minions. So quite often a wizard or a leader will have followers and also minions. So it's nice to have those ready in case. So let's say you meet the Bandit Captain, pop up the encounter, and what this is a random encounter, and it's set up as 1 plus the number of PCs. So what this does, this little formula here, it takes this and multiplies it by the number of PCs on the party sheet. So I don't have any on there now, but depending on how many NPCs are in the campaign and how many are on this particular sheet, not the combat tracker, but the party sheet, this will add the number of PCs plus 1. So there'll always be one more bandit than there are players. So this scales with the size of the group instead of making it a static number or a random number like 1 to 4 or something like that. You can do it that way, but I kind of prefer to have it based on the strength of the party. So when he summons a minion, all you have to do is pop this up, or when he summons more than one minion, and you have your combat tracker set up, you can send that over. You can generate it, and that will in this case it's only making one because I don't have anything on the combat tracker, and then I'll just add it to tracker, and that will basically set up your encounter right away. You can also send it to a quick map if you have the assets for it. Hey Rob, hey Dan. And that's basically one way to kind of speed things up, and so you're not digging through, especially when you have summons, minions, even like sentient weapons and stuff. You need to have that linked on the back. That really helps a lot. And you just come to here's your main stat block, and then you just flip over to the notes tab, and everything's right there. And the last thing is loot. So some people like loot when it comes to their NPCs, especially when you have like a boss or something. They're going to have more than just a couple coins usually. In this case, I pre-made this. This is a parcel. I could drag this onto a character's sheet, and all that stuff would populate in there, or I could add it to the party sheet under the inventory tab and just drag and drop this in here, and then award that later as the players recover the item. So this is another thing that's helpful if you want to speed things up or you want to have it accessible when you're playing. So you can have a static treasure that's linked to the story. So maybe there is some loot that belongs to the bandits that's kind of like their shared loot. But if you want an individual loot for every NPC or for the bosses, you can make your own and then link it to the sheet, because this won't show up or be available unless you defeat or capture or kill the bandit leader. So this might give you options to award your players, and it's a lot simpler having it here than digging through a list of parcels to award your players. So these are just things to help speed up your gameplay so you're not digging through everything. And another thing is it'll reduce this clutter here with all these different windows and stuff. When you're trying to find that during gameplay, it really slows things down. So the idea is to have this NPC here, you have it on the combat tracker and ready to go. And then when you need all this extra stuff that I'm showing you, you can just flip to the notes tab. It's all right there. So that makes it a lot simpler than trying to go through all the menu items on the right-hand side, unless you really have to. So if you take that extra few minutes to add things, or maybe not just a few minutes, maybe it's 10 minutes. So take that extra time, add new images if you need to, add some of these dialogues in here that would really help with roleplay, and then write some notes about their tactics and what they can do and their limitations and their treasure and their appearance and all those things to really make these things stand out, come alive, and make Fantasy Grounds work for you. When you don't do this extra stuff, you're going to be doing it during game time. So either do it by by hook or crook. You're gonna end up having to go through all of these different things if you don't have those linked, and it could be problematic. If you're not familiar with the NPC, take the time to look it over, and if they have minions or things you need to summon, it's nice to have those linked on the back. So that's why I have this random encounter thing that scales with the group. Now it's going to take a bit to get used to doing all this stuff because you are creating assets. So for instance, I made a couple tables. I made I made the NPC images. We had to add those, and then we made some encounters. So that's 3 or 4 different assets that I had to build in order to link it to the NPC. So that takes a little time to do that. But once you get it down and you understand how it works, and if you're only doing it for the main NPCs, it's not that bad. If you're trying to do it for every single thing in the game, that's a lot of work. So, it's kind of pick your battles there. But you don't also need every single thing that I have back here. This is just examples of the types of information that you can place on the back of an NPC card. So this is also applicable to other rule sets, so not just D&D. If you have another rule set that's your favorite, and the NPC stat block has the notes or the others tab, you can add this information there. Most of the cases, you can have links back there. You can do whatever you want on this tab. So this is like your, I guess it's like your notepad here for each NPC. So even if you had like a formal name, you can put that up here too. You can replace this name up here, or in this case, what I would do is give this Bandit Captain a name. But down below, I would unidentify it. And then when you put this on the combat tracker, it might have the actual name hidden. And then this would be just say Bandit. So if I drag and drop this on there now, let me lock it. See, it says Lyra because it's identified. But if I unidentify it, yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but essentially you can have it identified or unidentified, and what it will do is when you add it to the combat tracker, it'll only show this name up here. So in this case, it says Bandit. We'll say female Bandit. Let's see if that helps. So I'm going to lock it, and let me get rid of these. There we go. So that was just a little flub there, but yeah, so now it says female bandit, but once you understand that it's the leader, like after roleplay and such, you can show the NPC if they were hiding, and then you can also change it, toggle it to its true name. So she might introduce herself as Lyra, which is a NPC name that I had made up for this particular instance when you had a female variation of the Bandit Captain. So these are just things you can do to speed up your game. So you go from something like this on the right to something like this on the left. And like I said, you don't have to include every single thing. I mean, these are just suggestions. I made this description because a lot of times you have the same old generic one up here, and it really doesn't give you a description. It kind of gives you like an overview. And there might be a little bit of description in here, but it doesn't really give you the actual physical attributes, or it might not give you the role-playing attributes. So there's different things in here that are kind of missing with most NPCs. I kind of miss the fact that they don't do this very much anymore in role-playing game products. They generally give you an image, a token, the stat block, and maybe, if you're lucky, a couple things on the back. And that's really... Yeah, it is. Yeah, you can use a true name on certain things like NPCs. So if you make it specific to your campaign, it fits in with your lore, that may be a thing to help. So you can add that true name there, but you can have it as unidentified, so they won't know who that individual is until they talk to them and such. So that could be a thing. The other thing is just creating that lore to fit your setting. You can use, like I use, that monsters know what they're doing. Keep them on for the actual information about the tactics and how they generally can play out. But then I also looked at wiki guides for whatever setting I'm in. So if you were like in the Forgotten Realms, I made up this whole thing where this was Lyra. She hangs out outside of Baldur's Gate. It kind of goes into this whole thing about how she's, how they ambush people and what her affiliations are with the guild and all kinds of stuff. So you have all this like kind of like lore-friendly information about important NPCs, and that really helps with your gameplay, because then it immerses the NPCs into the actual storyline. So for instance, the lore here that I had for this particular NPC, I didn't put it on the back here because this is more of a generic thing. But if I wanted to create a specific NPC for her, I would include this instead. So this has Lyra Shadowblade Voss. She lives or hangs out around the Western Heartlands near Baldur's Gate. She's known as Shadowblade among her followers. She's a notorious bandit captain who operates along the Tradeway, the major trade route that stretches from Baldur's Gate to Waterdeep. Her gang, the Black Knives, is infamous for its audacious heists and merciless ambushes preying on merchants and travelers. So then it goes into, her origins. Like, it says that Her origins are shrouded in mystery, but rumors suggest that she was once a skilled thief in the bustling city of Baldur's Gate. Her cunning and ruthlessness earned her the moniker Shadowblade among the city's underworld. However, a botched heist led to her exile from the city, prompting her to gather a band of outlaws and establish her domain along the tradeway. So they're headquartered in the Reaching Woods. It's a forest known for dense foliage and dangerous wildlife. Lyra uses the natural terrain to her advantage, setting traps and ambush points along the tradeway. Her bandits are well trained and equipped. They use guerrilla tactics to swiftly strike and then disappear before the Flaming Fist mercenaries or other law enforcement can respond. So this kind of goes into some pretty deep stuff here. So it even gets into politics. It says that Lyra's activities have drawn the attention of the Flaming Fist mercenaries from Baldur's Gate and the Harpers, who see her as a destabilizing force in the region. While she has managed to evade capture so far, the increased scrutiny and pressure from those organizations suggest a major confrontation may be imminent. So you can use this kind of stuff to springboard into your own adventure. You can almost make a whole adventure just on that information. So that's why it's kind of important to do a little bit of prep. You don't have to do all this stuff, but definitely a little helps. Goes a long ways. And having these little pre-made dialogue things is helpful. So here's another one where she might say, I'm always curious about the stories of wanderers. Tell me, what brings you to my part of the world? You know, like just little things like that. Not all of them are hostile. Some of them are kind of intrigued or curious. You know, you can kind of vary those up a little bit. Most of these are hostile, but not all of them. So like this one says, you've interrupted my day, which means you'll need to make it worth my while. Speak quickly. So this, you know, these are different things that I kind of helped build up and made this available in case you want to run her during an encounter. So these are just ideas. The lore stuff is going to depend on your familiarity with your setting or your adventure, and maybe just utilizing the wiki guides to help you formulate your backstories for these NPCs. You don't have to be as detailed, but the more information you have, the easier it is to run. But you can also overwhelm yourself. So you got to be careful of how much information you want to add. It's up to your comfort level, your experience. I myself don't mind having this big old list here because it does take a minute to scroll down, but just use the slider and just move it that way. So that can be annoying in Fantasy Grounds. So if you've got too much stuff, you know, then you're scrolling up and down too much. So probably try to keep it as small or as big as one full page. That way you're not doing that kind of thing during a game. Because when you're having to scroll through, the same thing with a combat tracker, if you got 50 gazillion NPCs on here and you have to keep scrolling up and down, that's very annoying. So try to avoid that as much as possible. So I would think, honestly, if you can keep this information on one page, it's way easier to deal with. When you've got several pages, like this is probably, let's see, 1, 2, it's about 2.5 pages worth of stuff here. So I don't think I would necessarily put every single thing like this on there. These are just options that I wanted to show. But this kind of thing, if you really want a novel, you know, put it in a note or a story entry. If you can even link that to here. So if you don't want this whole thing loaded up with a bunch of crap, you can make a story entry and link it here and then pop that up and use that as your reference sheet for the NPCs. So you don't have to put everything in the back. But I like to have it all in one spot so I'm not digging around and, you know, having 50 windows open. So that's kind of what the main takeaway here is, to utilize Fantasy Grounds for what it's good for, which is using links and, you know, building the content and having it accessible and keeping everything down to a minimum so that you're not constantly having to shovel through all of this content over here on the right. And that really comes with experience and time. I know a lot of new users do that. I used to do that. I used to go through all these things through every game session, and I'm digging through and searching, and you know, you're not certain where things are. And you can always use these shortcuts on the bottom, but you have, you know, it depends on what you're trying to do. But I usually will put my notes down here at the bottom, and then I'll link all my main NPCs together, and all my notes, and that way when I'm playing I don't have to go through all that stuff again. And I think that's where some of the frustration comes in, is just kind of a misunderstanding of how to use the platform to your benefit instead of fighting it. And I think that's one of the things that I want to get into with Brad, or Adam Bradford, when he gets acclimated. Is this is the kind of thing that would help GMs and such, and regardless of the rule set. So these are just little things that you don't really discover until you use the platform. And if you don't use a platform, you're not going to know. So that's kind of where this happens. Is I don't think there's a lot of good examples of the use cases for Fantasy Grounds. And I also think that people are using it the way they feel like they, just kind of naturally, and they're not really certain where things are. And when you're running a game, that really slows things down. So that's kind of my point of this whole thing, was not only to create more dynamic and useful NPCs, but how do you access that information quicker and more efficiently, and those sort of things. And I've done videos on how to make tables and that sort of thing. So that all comes in time. So you're not going to do all this stuff in one day. It's going to take you a while to get used to how Fantasy Grounds flows. And you have to develop your own kind of feng shui on how things are going to roll out for you. But once you understand the power of Fantasy Grounds, it really does make a lot of sense, and it can be very useful. Where you start getting into trouble is when you're digging around looking for stuff and you don't know what's what and where's this, and is what you'll end up doing is you just, okay, now I need to look at the dagger. And the window's always open in the center. So it would have been nice if you had already opened that dagger up before the game and you placed it where you want this to open. And then you're going to link it to the back of this character sheet in case you want to, look at it later. And that way you don't have to go through all that. And you do it in the beginning up front, and that slows down problems in the future. So do a little bit of work up front, and it pays dividends on the back end. And I think Fantasy Grounds is good for that if you do a little bit of prep. Some people just run off the seat of their pants, and that's generally when you're going through a gazillion different sources and different links and different windows. And that can be aggravating. So I don't, honestly, my personal opinion is Fantasy Grounds doesn't really do a good job with running stuff on the fly. I really think you got to link things together and try to, get things to line up before you run an adventure. But that's my personal opinion based off experience, time, using the platform. I've done it the other way where I've ran off the seat of my pants where I don't even know what encounters I have or what. And I just go into an NPC and then I'll drag it over into an encounter. I'll do all this in real time, but it really slows things down. So I don't think that this platform works well for running things on the fly with no prep. I really don't. I think you're kind of asking for it at that point in regards to troubles, having a million windows open, that sort of thing. So that's kind of a tip, or at least some advice. You don't have to like that, or you can hate me for that, but I'm really honestly telling you that from experience and from using the platform, that it really helps to do a little bit of prep and a lot less of that scrambling around while you're playing type thing. It's okay to do a little bit of that, but if you're constantly doing that, it's very frustrating and it takes too much time away from your gameplay, your players. So do yourself a favor and use the platform, get used to where stuff are, or where they is, and then put them together and link them and make it useful for you, and kind of arrange it like your notes, like you would be studying for a test or something. You got everything all kind of linked together and ready to go. Your teacher, your instructor says you can use your notes during a test. Well, use them. There's no point in just winging it every time. That's really difficult to do. Even as an experienced game master. I mean, I can do it, but it's going to take me time. And that's something that a lot of us don't have. And some people don't have the patience for it. I've lost players because I'm fumbling around and they're like, come on, I want my turn. And, you got 6 people waiting on you. It's not fun. it really makes for a long day when you have that sort of issue. So I would think that just linking stuff together, doing a little bit of prep, you don't have to read the whole book, or you just read a section. If there's an NPC in here like this that comes up, put a little bit more detail into it, and links and such, and then arrange your windows where you want them to open. And then when you actually play, it goes a lot smoother. It's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be a lot better than trying to go through these links and stuff over here on the right. Oh, wait, where's the potion of healing? And then you got to look it up. I see this a lot, and I've done this too. I'm guilty of it. But this type of thing right here is what's going to slow the game down, and it's not fun. Especially if you're a player and you're new to Fantasy Grounds and you don't understand all the nuances, it's just going to piss you off, to be honest. And that's not the intent of having a virtual tabletop. The intent is to make this a tool to help you run games. And what ends up happening is that a lot of times the game will run us. So we end up running, the game doesn't flow very well, and we end up, letting Fantasy Grounds or the rules kind of run our games instead of us doing it the other way around. And that takes a bit of time and experience and practice to do that. So hopefully this helps a little bit. If you guys are pissed off or whatever, that's fine. I'm just giving you my opinion about it. But there are a lot of individuals out there that run off the seat of their pants, and it's very difficult to do that. It's not an easy thing. So I don't do it that way anymore. I've tried it. It works, but it takes too long. And that's really the reason I don't do it. I like the creativity and just coming up with things on the fly. That's really fun. But it's not fun always, and it can be a real nuisance. And if you're a paid GM, people are paying you to do this, I would not run that way if I can help it. Unless everyone at your table is used to that style and that's the way you guys play, that's cool. But if it's a new group and you don't know anything about them and you're new to Fantasy Grounds and the rules and Discord and your computer, all those things add up, and it really makes for a long day. So anyhow, folks, take care. Happy Friday, or actually Friday. Happy Monday, and I'll see you guys around next time.